Hi, it's Bob again. Today's trip was almost a repeat performance of last week's at the River Ouse. However, it differed in one important respect, namely, I didn't catch anything. So, you can either turn off now, and I wouldn't blame you, or you can listen to my thoughts on the matter while watching me fish. Here I've arrived at the mill stream and you can see I'm fairly well wrapped up. It was of course the 1st of December, the first day of meteorological winter. It was very bright but extremely cold. There was a very fresh breeze blowing upstream here. At first my hands were absolutely freezing, but it's quite amazing how the body adjusts, and after a while they didn't trouble me too much. Anyway, back to the fishlessness. This spot I'm in now has only disappointed me on one occasion before, and that's when the water level was extremely high. And even when I haven't managed to take a fish, I have had bites. Today I didn't get a touch, not a whimper from the rod top. I stuck it out for about 3/4 of an hour on the basis that I normally find if there are chub in the swim, and if those chub are inclined to feed, you're going to find out fairly quickly. I did think that perhaps somebody had already fished the swim before I arrived. I didn't arrive till about 10 a.m, so not being a particularly early bird, it was quite feasible that somebody else could have been there. Certainly the mud in the swim bore the imprints of shoes, boots, but they could of course have been from a previous day. My experience has shown that if you take a chub out of this stream, then you need to wait quite a while for things to settle down. So the thought that somebody else had beat me to it was something that was in my mind, although as the day progressed I was less sure of that. I did have a group of ducks on the opposite bank to keep me amused while I was sitting there waiting for something to happen. And also I was quite fortunate to have a kingfisher that flew past me as they do, whoosh, blue streak, but on this occasion it actually perched on the branch on the opposite bank, so that was quite a highlight. It did make me think how the kingfishers actually find food in the winter, because while in the summer the edges and the shallows of the rivers and streams are teeming with little fish, you rarely see them in the winter. So given that they're small birds and they obviously need to look for small fish, I'm not quite sure how they survive in the winter. You might be able to hear the wind. You can see some of the greenery blowing around there. In fact, it was quite strong, and it was blowing upstream and it was cold. Whether that was a factor in regard to the fish not feeding, I'm not sure. I'm about to call it a day on this spot here. As you see, I've been sitting there patiently, hardly moving a muscle, and the rod has been sitting there patiently, hardly moving at all, give or take the occasional deflection due to the wind and possibly a little bit of debris on the line, but nothing that I would judge to be a fish. As I was packing my things together and just about to walk upstream to another spot, I saw another angler walking towards me, and that sort of made me think, oh, perhaps he had been here before me today. but he hadn't. He was fishing up in the Weirpool, and we exchanged a few words. And it seems that he, like me, was having a very, very tough day. Morning. Any good?
Nothing in the pool at all.
Not a touch here.
Hey?
Not a touch here. Yeah.
There's gudgeon if you want to play with them.
Gudgeon.
But nothing any bigger. I went on lobworm, went on a smaller worm.
Well, I usually give it about half hour, 3/4 an hour, and if there's nothing there,
Yeah.
nothing touching, it's
When
not.
they're feeding, it's lovely in there.
Yeah. No.
Have you started in here?
I've been here about half an hour, 3/4 an hour.
And
Nothing.
nothing.
Touch. I was here last week and I was getting bites I couldn't hit,
Yeah.
but today I'm not even getting anything. The temperature's gone down very quickly, hasn't it? I've now moved up to the head of the mill stream, and the Weirpool behind is where the chap we've just heard was fishing and catching gudgeon. That brings back memories of childhood. By the way, I'm not actually wearing sunglasses there. Having bought my feeder rod this week, which has got a nice fine top on it, I found with my my eyesight that actually I was having a bit of difficulty focusing on it, especially with the rippling water behind. I carry an old pair of prescription glasses in my bag, and they happen to be reactor light. So when you get a bright day, they darken in response to the sunshine. So, as I say, the reason I'm wearing them is so I can see the bites, not really because of the sunshine, which was pretty weak. In this spot, I actually did get some taps on the rod top, but they were just that, taps. Vibrations, all the hallmarks of a smaller fish struggling to have a go at the bait that was too big for its mouth. Earlier in the year, I actually caught a few dace from this swim on ledgered luncheon meat. Obviously with luncheon meat, the dace could whittle it down and ultimately mouth it, but today I'm using cheese paste, which is not so easily nibbled away. It's possible, therefore, that they were dace having a nibble and giving the taps on the rod top. I did strike a few times, but to no avail, nothing there. Of course, at the back of one's mind all the time is that although they're nibbly bites and they have all the hallmarks of smaller fish, it's not unknown for larger chub on some occasions to be very, very careful, and rather than giving the usual chub pull on the rod top, they are much more circumspect about how they take the bait. But it wasn't to be, so just like last week, having tried these two spots on the mill stream, whereas last week I actually managed to take a chub out of one of them and lose a chub in the other. Today, no such luck, or bad luck if you like. Anyway, having tried these two spots, again like last week, I decided to make my way over to the main river and see if I could do a bit better over there. When I got back to the car park, there were in fact quite a few cars there, so I started to think that the spot that I was aiming for on the main river may well be occupied. I chatted to a couple of anglers who were fishing the main river on the car park side of the stretch, and both of them hadn't had anything either, so the pattern for the day was starting to emerge. So I made my way over to the island, which in fact splits two main streams of the river. One stream on the far side, where I fished last week, is quite a strong flow, whereas the other side, the car park side, is much gentler. So I've set up in the same spot as last week, and I was quite surprised to find it free, given that there were a number of cars in the car park, and this always looks a good spot. But as I was actually getting ready to fish, another angler walked past me on the path behind me, and he was coming from the point of the island. And I'm fairly convinced that he would have fished this spot on the way up there. He was much like me. He was set up for just roaming around from swim to swim. So at that point, I started to think perhaps he had already fished this spot, and if so, if he had taken a fish, that would have perhaps put the fish down. And indeed, although I fished this spot for probably getting on for a couple of hours, other than a couple of very half-hearted taps on the rod top, which probably were smaller fish, there was nothing that looked anything like a chub. But here I was completely out of the wind, as you can see by the surface of the water. Very, very calm location. And it was really quite pleasurable sitting there. Obviously, always hoping something would arrive. But nothing did, and as I say, after a couple of hours I decided to call it a day. It was starting to get colder. What warmth there was in the sun was rapidly disappearing. So I packed up and made my way back to the car park. The first thing I noticed was all bar one of the anglers on the bank on the car park side of the main river had packed up and gone. And in fact the car park was down to 3 cars, whereas it had been quite busy. So it seems that generally speaking people had given up on the day. And when I got to the car park, I had a long chat with one of the members of the club. He was a guy who's involved with the club and been a member for a long time. And it seems that people haven't had much success lately. He recounted one guy who hadn't caught anything in the last 4 visits. So obviously things are a little bit tough at the moment. I follow a chub fishing group on Facebook, and it's interesting there because obviously every day or so you get a picture of a whopping great chub that someone's caught somewhere. But it's interesting to read the comments below because aside from the congratulations and the well dones and all that sort of stuff, there are many people saying, how do you do it? I've been out X number of times and I can't seem to get a bite. Things are so difficult at the moment. It seems, therefore, that it might well have been, or is, a difficult year. Probably a lot to do with the rivers going up and down like yo-yos. You know, a few weeks ago they were flooded, and shortly afterwards they were down to nearly summer levels, and then they come up a bit again. So I'm not sure the fish know where they are, let alone the anglers. With those thoughts, I will leave you now because this video has gone on quite a long time considering there was no fish to look at, but it's enabled me to sort of register some of my thoughts about things, and I hope you've found it interesting as well as watching me sit by the riverbank. But it's now time to wind things up. If you did stay the course, thank you for watching me, even though I didn't catch any fish, and I hope you found some of the things I had to say and some of my thoughts interesting. But it's now time to say bye for now, and I hope you will join me on the next adventure when, let's hope, there's a few more fish to be seen.